Welcome to the Bulwark podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes. It is Friday, and it has been a busy week. So because it's Friday, once again, I am joined by New York Times bestselling author Tim Miller. So, Tim.
Yeah, it is good. We might need some music for me now when I get called in. I'm happy to be here. I'm getting caffeinated, and people say it's the doldrums, summer doldrums, and we
Not
got a
today.
week. We got a packed show. Let's do
No,
it.
you and I were just running down all the things that are going on today, and it was like, we're not going to get to all this, are we? So could we start with the politics of petulance? This is an extraordinary story, and I want you to try to explain this to me. Where back up all the things that are going on here. The Republicans are basically having a tantrum in the Senate because they feel that they were outmaneuvered by
Yeah.
Chuck Schumer and Joe Manchin. By the way, words we'd never thought that we would say, and so they're voting against bills for veterans and burn pits. They are, threatening to torpedo gay marriage legislation. They began whipping against the semiconductor bill that they had just voted for because this is just wrong and we have to do all this. And as I wrote in my newsletter this morning, this is not the politics of any sort of ideological principle. This is the politics of pure petulance. And I will say that yesterday, Republicans in the Senate took a vote that I think they're going to regret. You may disagree with me on this. I think they're going to regret this. Jon Stewart is holding nothing back, and he's talking about the reversal by a number of Republican senators who had voted for this legislation that would provide more support for veterans who had been exposed to burn pits, and then flip-flopped, as part of their petulance, and voted against a procedural motion. This is Jon Stewart yesterday in D.C.
She sat in an office with Mitch McConnell and a war veteran from Kentucky, and he looked that man in the eyes and he said, we'll get it done. And he lied to him. Because Mitch McConnell yesterday flipped. I'm used to the lies. I'm used to the hypocrisy. Senator Pat Toomey won't take a meeting with the veterans groups. Sends out his chief of staff. I'm used to the cowardice. I've been here a long time. Senate's where accountability goes to die. These people don't care. They're never losing their jobs. They're never losing their health care. Pat Toomey didn't lose his job. He's walking away. God knows what kind of pot of gold he's stepping into to lobby this government to shit on more people. I'm used to all of it, but I am not used to the cruelty.
So here's one story. Blindsided veterans erupted in anger and indignation Thursday after Senate Republicans suddenly tanked a widely supported bipartisan measure that would have expanded medical coverage for millions of combatants exposed to toxic burn pits during their service. Okay, in fairness, Pat Toomey is saying, well, no. I'm just objecting to certain accounting changes. They changed the way that this is being spent and all of this. Most people aren't buying that, as far as I can tell. This looks like it was like, no, you're going ahead with reconciliation, so we're just going to fuck you over on all this other legislation. But Tim, I mean, don't most politicians have that gene, that instinct that says, don't take this vote, don't do this right now? What's going on?
Well, the first thing that's going on, and I just think the important thing for everybody just to let settle in and just appreciate on this Friday going into our weekend, is that old Joe Manchin, Papa Blacklung, is just running circles around Cocaine Mitch, running circles around him. And it might even be, this could make it even better, Charlie. It might even be a Mr. Magoo type situation. Like, he might be doing it by accident. I don't know. It's hard to tell if he's a tactical genius or just so dumb that he outmaneuvered Mitch by accident. Either way, Mitch gets outmaneuvered. So people who don't get it, I want to get into the merits of all this, because it's so strange. Sometimes Washington will go 3, 4, 5 months and not do anything of use to anybody.
Right.
And like this week, there are like 3 or 4 bills that have real world impact. So I want to get to the merits of all of them. But just really quick, for people who, we're not a Beltway navel gazing podcast, Charlie. So we haven't been following all the minute by minute. Not all the listeners might not have been following. So the short of it is this: there's been this microchips bill that's been sitting around in Congress for quite a while now, and it had the votes to pass, but Democrats didn't push it through. It felt at the time like maybe that was a tactical mistake. Maybe it was, and that this accidentally accrued to their favor. Maybe Chuck Schumer is a tactical genius. Hard to say. But essentially, Mitch McConnell said that they're not going to vote on this microchip bill, which is important for competitiveness to China, unless the Democrats agree that BBB, or what has turned it, whatever turns of BBB, is dead. Right. So that was kind of the deal, essentially, that Mitch McConnell struck, is like he's going to hold this chips bill hostage until whoever, Joe Manchin in this case, says that, he's not going to go ahead with some version of a reconciliation bill. And Joe Manchin said that in an interview. It was, I guess, last week that he said he was going to kill this. Maybe it was earlier this week. We're living dog years these days. And so they moved forward with the chips bill. Passed the chips bill, passed it through the Senate, 64 votes, I think. Goes to the House. Yeah. The next day, Joe Manchin and Chuck Schumer announced we've got a deal on the reconciliation bill. And so that gave Mitch McConnell the raw ass. That's a technical term. And so he gets pissed. The Republican senators are pissed. You can now imagine. Now I want to get into, some of the material from the book, right? They lost in the game, right? Their asses are chapped. They're walking around the Senate dining room. John Cornyn and all the other senators are going up to Mitch saying, "What happened? We got outmaneuvered by Manchin? Like, how is this possible? We can't let this stand. We got to fight these guys back. We got to stop them. We can't keep giving them all these wins. You can't give Biden chips and reconciliation and the burn pits bill and gay marriage. Like, we got to slow their momentum." And so they talk themselves into basically the politics of petulance, as you said, which is in order to slap back at the Democrats for the successful procedural gamesmanship, they're going to oppose the burn pits bill. At least some of them. It's possible that Toomey himself, who's retiring, might have had issues with the specifics of the changes, but like, this is not Mitch McConnell's concern. I mean, give me a break. And then Susan Collins said the same thing, essentially, on gay marriage. So once you strip away all the bullshit, what the Republicans have decided to do is, because they are upset that a chips bill passed, which they supported, and that a reconciliation bill is going to be brought up for a vote that they have a chance to oppose, in order to get back, quote unquote, at the Democrats for that, they are going to refuse to codify gay marriage and refuse to help wounded veterans. This seems like cutting off your nose to spite your face. But my answer to your original question, why are they doing it, goes back to exactly what I'd been writing about. This is DC brainworms. Like, you get so wrapped up in, am I winning right now, or am I losing? Am I playing this game, or am I not playing the game? That you end up doing things that accrue to the harm of the people that you're purporting to serve. And so, this is just one thing on this. I got a fair criticism email from a Bulwark fan one time that said, you guys, every time, like, the Democrats are incompetent, you say they don't play hard-nosed football enough. They don't play it too rough like Republicans. Then every time the Democrats do something a little over the line on, whatever, Supreme Court expansion or helping MAGAs in primaries, you wrap their knuckles and say, Democrats are just being just as nihilistic as Republicans. And this is the deal. This is an example. This is how you do it. This is what Manchin Schumer did. This is political gamesmanship that was within integrity, where the politics and the policy align. Like, where I start to get pissed is, and not as pissed as Jon Stewart. I mean, that was fucking on fire. But when I start to get pissed is when you play the political games in a way that hurt people and that go against the policy, right? And that's obviously what the Republicans are doing right now. And I again, does this mean the Democrats are going to win the midterms? I don't know. But is it a real political loser for Republicans? And do the Democrats have a little bit of wind at their sails for the first time in a year? Yeah, absolutely. I think.
No, I think right now you're looking at the state of play and you go, okay, this is weird. This is check my notes here, but it looks like Democrats in array, Republicans in disarray on all of this. But your point is, I mean, first of all, this is bad. It's bad optics, is bad positioning, but it's also bad on the substance. And so today is the final day of the legislative session, right? Congressional session. So if they don't fix this with the burn pit issue, this is going to be hung around Republicans for a month. There's nothing that they will be able to do about it. I mean, this is a vote that Ron Johnson took, that Mike Lee took, that Republicans will face, so we say, difficult reelection fights, voted against these veterans. And these veterans are out there. And this doesn't play like a partisan issue. This is like, are you for the veterans? Are you against the veterans? You sent them off to war. This happened to them. You promised that you were going to do something about it, and then you reneged on this promise for reasons that, frankly, you're not going to be able to articulate clearly
Right.
and quickly and easily. It is disastrous. And the Susan Collins, suggesting that the surprise climate deal, is going to make it much, much, much harder to pass a bill protecting same-sex marriage. I thought your tweet was perfect. You said, you're translating her, summarized her position. I will oppose an overwhelmingly popular bill to protect gay marriage that I would otherwise support because I'm mad the Democrats held a vote on this microchip bill that I also supported. This really is, for people who want to know what the term DC brainworms means, this makes sense in her head in that caucus, and it just strikes me as disastrous politics. So, there have been two things. And of course, we often give Democrats advice that they feel free to ignore. But number one, in terms of going at Republican vulnerabilities, earlier this week, I thought Joe Biden came up with a good line. He says, you can't be pro-cop and pro-insurrection.
Yep.
Take that to them. You are not the party that backs the blue if, in fact, you won't stand up for law enforcement involved with the January 6th. That's number one. Number two, Republicans have wrapped themselves in the cause of we stand with the veterans. We are all for the veterans, except POWs, who like the ones who aren't captured, right? But we are all for the veterans, and then make them explain this. So they should be pounding and pounding and pounding away on all of this. This feels like the first time in about 18 months that most of the energy of the Democrats is not being spent attacking other Democrats.
Unbelievable.
Kirsten Sinema does, but go
Oh, yeah,
on.
TBD on cinema. But okay, I want to get to cinema in a second. Just really quick on the burn pits, on the vets one more time.
Mhm.
Stewart on Newsmax. Did you see this? I tweeted this yesterday.
I
People
did.
can just, like, go down my feed. Like, this is how you do it, right? Like, this is, they're going into deep Republican turf and not, trying to fight on ground that, like, make the Democrats feel like they're on their high horse or whatever, but that actually don't land with Republican voters, right? Which it feels like is what the Democrats do a lot. The finger wag. This is the type of finger wagging that's like, actually, you got to feel like the Newsmax viewers are watching this and saying, yeah, this Jon Stewart, I might not like
Absolutely.
this guy, but this guy is right. Like, this is BS. This is crazy. We're not funding our veterans who are dealing with long-term medical issues. Lucas Kuntz, who's running for Senate in Missouri, just had a just lick spittle like Twitter feed. He's a veteran who had some exposure to burn pits, and just about how angry he is, has friends who are dealing with this, former people that he worked with. This is a loser, like a flat loser. And if you're putting yourself in a situation where you can let somebody like Jon Stewart go on to Newsmax and get points over on the host, that's a sign that you've
This is a really good.
you've stepped in in it.
I link this together in my mind. This may be my Bulwark brainworm, but
Okay, sure.
on the issue of exploiting vulnerabilities, the January 6th committee just put out a tweet. I think it was a couple of days ago, and maybe 2 days ago, saying 1 year ago today, basically, officers Harry Dunn, Michael Fanone, Daniel Hodges, and Sergeant Aquilino Gunnell testified about their experiences defending the Capitol against a violent mob. Through our hearings, the American people have seen what our brave officers had to endure on January 6th. And there's a picture of those officers, and there's a picture of Adam Kinzinger shaking one of their hands, Liz Cheney shaking one of their hands, another congressman shaking Daniel Hodges' hand. This is I think it's such a stark contrast, the way that the Republicans who have downplayed the significance of January 6th have really abandoned those officers, are not interested in those officers, don't recognize them really as heroes, minimize their heroism. So what I tweeted out this morning was, my advice to January 6th is, okay, you had them testify a year ago. Do it again. Bring them back. Primetime testimony this time. Play the greatest hits. You may think, well, we've already done that. No, It's going to be new to the 17, 20 million people who might watch primetime hearing in September. And again, in terms of, highlighting the hypocrisy. By the way, speaking of highlighting the hypocrisy, before I forget, I have to mention this. You saw this tweet from the Kansas City Star. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley this is not a parody. This is not a joke.
I know.
Josh Hawley is writing a book titled
The Masculine Virtues. Is that what it is?
Manhood, the Masculine Virtues Americans Need. Run away. Josh Hawley, manhood because I am manly. See, this is the kind of stuff that's going to kill them in the long run. It's like, we are for veterans. We are for cops. We are manly. Okay?
Yeah, I just add, again, sometimes I don't know. I already did my Josh Hawley. I guess I mispronounced. This shows I'm a man of the people, though. Last week I was corrected. I mispronounced. I said he took a gap year on the River Thames, and I guess it's River Thames. You didn't correct me. You're a man of the world. You should have corrected me. I'm just a regular American out here in flyover country. I don't know how to pronounce the River Thames, but we already did that shtick, and I think you covered it. So I just want to talk. It's also on the merits. Like, this is the thing that makes people so mad, and that eventually, you just have to hope that it works to the Republicans' disfavor, and even if it doesn't, whatever, right? Like these cops,
at least entertains us. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the Hawley thing entertains us, but also just on the emotional side, these cops, like what they had to go through, because Donald Trump is a man baby.
Yeah,
it's just sickening. It makes you sick. And the fact that all these guys are hiding behind Liz Cheney's pantsuit or whatever, like trying to deal with this, is pathetic. Like, these guys are all cowards, and they should be shamed. And for no other reason than do I agree with you. I don't. Maybe it's Bulwark brainworms to think it would help politically, but if for no other reason, just to make these guys feel bad and feel small, I think it's a great idea.
Products and statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or illness. If you're a man over 40, listen up, because this could impact how much you're getting done during the day and at night. The harsh reality is, once you hit 40, your body has less free testosterone. Here's the good news. Nugenix, the #1 selling testosterone booster at GNC, has changed the game again for men over 40 with Nugenix Total T, their most powerful man-boosting formula ever. And guys all over America are raving about it. Jeremy P. says, this is the best product I've found to raise T levels. I plan on using this product for the rest of my life. And Shane D., he says I had no drive and was tanked out at the end of the day. After 3 months, my energy level is through the roof. I work out like most 19-year-olds, and I'm 47. Guys over 40, you need Nugenix Total T. Text Bulwark to 231231 right now for your complimentary bottle of Nugenix Total T. Text now and they'll include a bottle of Nugenix Thermo, their most powerful fat incinerator ever, to help you get back into shape fast, absolutely free. Text BULWARK to 231231.
Message and data rates may apply.
Okay, Tim, let's just talk about what's going on in some of the Senate races. Fox News poll out showing Dr. Oz trailing John Fetterman by 11 points in Pennsylvania. That's just that's not working for him over there, is it?
Dr. Oz is running one of the worst campaigns that I've ever seen for Senate. He's got time to turn it around, but it's
always Herschel Walker.
Yeah, what is his message? At least the Herschel Walker people seem to be trying to work with a bad candidate, right? Trying to do the best they can with an absolutely insane candidate. Dr. Oz, it's unclear what the strategy is of Dr. Oz. And while Fetterman just relentlessly pummels him for being a charlatan from New Jersey. The Oz campaign is just flailing. I saw the first ad that he put on TV that was just kind of this hodgepodge of whatever Fox News speak about socialism and whatever. I'm sure it's okay. I'm sure it will land with the Republican base, shore up those voters. But I don't exactly know what his plan is to start to wedge Fetterman. So that's that right now. I'm gonna do a triad takeover on Monday and give people a full Senate analysis of where we stand. But in the Tim. What should we call it? The Tim race rankings. I'm stealing from Charlie Cook. Pennsylvania is feeling like a pickup for Democrats, which then gets them to 51. Okay, which means then the Republicans, the short of it, and I'll go into this deeper on Monday, but the short of it is that then Republicans need to take 2 back, to put turtle Mitch back into the majority leader's chair. And so it's a hard map for that to come up with that. I think that it's possible for sure. Nevada, I think, looks like a prime pickup opportunity, especially with Hispanics moving over. Arizona, which I want to talk about next, Mark Kelly. I think that's an interesting race potential. I just came from Colorado. Maybe the most normal Republican besides Brad Raffensperger nominated in the country was nominated for the Colorado Senate race. So I'd keep an eye on that. But now that's a stretch. Colorado's a blue state. So we're really, a situation that you would think in a wave year, the Republicans would be in a better position than they are to pick up just one seat, which is all they need to take the Senate. And I don't know, then Georgia, you're settling on Herschel Walker. So it's ugly. And I'm not sure that's really like settled in for people yet. Like the new reality is that it's really more than a coin flip. I think the Democrats favor right now.
I don't disagree with that, which is why what's happening in Wisconsin is somewhat concerning to me, obviously being from Wisconsin and having a lot of baggage here. I think that Ron Johnson was the most vulnerable Republican in the country, a Republican incumbent in the country. But in the last week, we've had a couple of developments. Two of the other leading Democrats dropped out of the Senate race, basically clearing the field for Mandela Barnes, who is, the most aggressively progressive candidate in that race. This is the dream matchup for Ron Johnson. I think one of the several reasons that Johnson decided to break his pledge and run for a third term was because he thought he might face Mandela Barnes, who has like lots of stuff in his Oppo research file. So that one might be taken off the table. You may disagree with me about that.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm a little confused. Maybe you're on the ground there, and I haven't heard about why all of them dropped out. I would have thought that they would have cleared the field for one to challenge Mandela. So I don't know.
Sarah Godlewski is still in the race, and she's the more centrist candidate. But
she just dropped out of the race 23 minutes ago. I have a breaking news item for us.
Well, that is fascinating because this sort of thing generally doesn't happen. That people, this close to the primary, all drop out.
So I'm sure I'll say the one thing about, and you're there, so I don't want to. I guess this is my one contrarian point. That's just more. It's less. I don't think that any of your concerns about Mandela are wrong. I'm just open to the idea that, Evers is more popular than Johnson in the state right now. Okay, so if you just look straight at the Marquette polling, favorability, Evers is not overwhelmingly popular, but he's more popular than Johnson, and more popular than Biden. So can Mandela kind of get some of the shine from that? Can he jack up turnout in Madison, Milwaukee enough? I think that if you look at his campaign messaging, it is attempting to try to not quite as aggressively as Tim Ryan, who, by the way, in Ohio is doing a fantastic job about this. Every Democrat should just watch Tim Ryan's ads and see how
that would be a pickup too.
That would be a pickup. It's tougher. It's much tougher state. Yeah. But can Mandela sort of use some of that? I don't know. I think all I'm saying is I don't think that it's quite as open and shut as you make it out to be. But I would agree that Johnson's a favorite.
Yeah, no, it is open and shut. And the downside for this, clearing the field for Barnes is that Barnes goes into a general election really untested. I mean, sometimes, as you know, primary can be kind of a trial by fire where you see how they, how nimbly they're able to respond to, negative attacks. And the other Democrats decided early on that they weren't going to go negative on Barnes. I mean, in private, of course, my email box is just absolutely jammed with people saying, Barnes is not electable. Wait till this hits him. And it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? And the answer is nothing. No outside money came in. So the fact is that
it's a funny thing about Democrats, by the way. It's like, I'm learning about my new coalition here. And in some ways it's kind of charming, but in other ways it might be self-harm. Is in Republican primaries, right? Like McCormick and Oz just tore each other's faces off in that Republican primary. They did not pull a single punch. They went for the throat. And in Democratic primaries, if you do I was talking to somebody about Wisconsin before everybody dropped out, just hypothetically, and we were just kind of gaming it out. And I had a mutual friend who's friends with Alex Lasry, and so we were kind of just sort of gaming out what might Lasry do. And it's even the lightest attack from Lasry, talking about unelectability, would have almost certainly accrued to his disfavor, right? Because Democratic voters would be so mad that they would be doing these nasty attacks that it would actually harm the attacker. We've seen this in the past in Democratic primaries. So it's just like the nature of the coalitions are such that this sort of trial by fire doesn't really happen. And the Democratic side, with few exceptions. I mean, like Elizabeth Warren just crushing Mike Bloomberg because he was such an obvious interloper, that worked. But a lot of times you see it backfire.
And the problem then is you don't know how Barnes is going to respond when it comes, because look, and I think you can email me, actually this stuff doesn't matter. But I mean, the stuff about, the defund the police, abolishing ICE, some of the other stuff, there's going to be $20 million worth of Oppo research now dumped, between now and November. Johnson and the Republicans will have no shortage of cash, and they will define Mandela Barnes in that particular way. So how will he respond? What will his pushback be? Well, we don't know, because he never had to do that during the primary. So that's the untested. So the other big story here in Wisconsin is this weird proxy fight now between much of the Republican elected establishment. I hate that word, actually. Former Governor Scott Walker, even Ted Cruz, Mike Pence supporting Rebecca Clayfish for governor. She's the former lieutenant governor. For reasons that are not clear to me or a lot of other folks, Donald Trump decided to make this one of his stands, and he has endorsed this businessman named Tim Michels. He's coming in. Trump is actually coming into Wisconsin to hold a rally for Tim Michels, I think on Monday. And interestingly enough, Ron Johnson is not going to show up at the rally because he's trying to stay out of what's becoming a very, very divisive primary. So here you have Donald Trump coming in and dividing the Republican Party right now in such a way that even Ron Johnson doesn't want to be associated with, because people are going, okay, so Rebecca Clayfish, we know her. She's been around a long time. She is very, very, very conservative. This notion now that she's a rhino, because I don't have any idea what that's about. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But once again, like in Arizona, we have a Pence versus Trump kind of proxy war. But also, Trump's aligned himself with a candidate that, Tim Michels is one of these out-of-state millionaires who has also a lot of baggage. And if he wins this primary, he is also kind of untested, because that the Democrats will then drop $10-20 million, doing what John Fetterman is doing to Dr. Oz, pointing out Tim Michels has this $17 million house in Connecticut. He's from out of town, and they have to have drones flying over with the pictures of his house. And it's like, guys, do you have any idea what's about to drop on you from there? So Tony Evers may be popular. He's a very uninspiring, very uncharismatic candidate who would normally be dead man walking in a Republican year. But Republicans seem to be in this mood of tearing each other's faces off at the moment, and Donald Trump is not helping.
I mean, as a personal matter, I couldn't give a shit less about Rebecca Clayfish versus Tim Michels, or who's better, who's worse. The funny thing for me watching all this is just the cowardly Republicans. In some ways, it's kind of sad and angering to watch the cowardly Republicans refuse to vote for the burn pit bill and the gay marriage, and to stand up and to stand up to Trump and convict him. In this case, it's kind of, their cowardice is pretty funny. I mean, Ron Johnson has to lie. I mean, what was his lie? He's got to wash his hair or something that day that Donald Trump is going to be there. He comes up with some excuse for why he can't be at the rally, and none of them have the cojones to just tell him to stop. Right? I mean, he's actively harming the party's chances and across multiple states. The Oz thing is just example A of this. It's quite unclear that Oz wins that primary without Trump's endorsement. Maybe Kathy Barnett does, and it's worse anyway, but maybe McCormick does, right? It's kind of unknown. So Trump is not just dividing, but pushing less electable people across the board, and none of these guys, are telling him to shut up. And we were talking about this on the next level. It's like, well, they kind of, they might say it on background or sort of imply that it's not helpful or whatever. But then, Trump goes on stage and is like, these guys are wino losers, and we're going to crush them. And then, on background, the quote unquote establishment guys are like, well, I wish Mr. Trump would look forward a little bit more, but he does. He was a great broad-shouldered leader, right? I mean, like it's not a real war here.
No. Okay. So speaking of Donald Trump, I know that you guys on the live stream last night were debating prosecution or pardon. Should Donald Trump go to jail? This doesn't seem like a hard question to me.
Yeah, I don't know that it merited the full 30-minute discussion last night. Yeah, I mean, he needs to rot in jail. I mean, there are obviously some prudential questions about, can you even impanel a jury for someone like Donald Trump? Is that even possible? If it is possible, is it possible to do so without having a crypto MAGA on there? Maybe not, right? I don't, there's some just, we're in uncharted waters here. What happens when you're prosecuting someone that's actively running for president? This feels like something that should be happening, in like Belarus, not the United States. But okay, the reality is, on the merits, I think if the question is, did he commit a seditious conspiracy to prevent the peaceful transfer of power? Obviously. So to me, well, I just don't see what choice you have except to prosecute him.
No, I agree. In fact, the more that I think about it, I mean, I do understand the prudential concerns, and people ought not to be under any illusions about how incendiary it is to charge the former president. I mean,
Right.
and in fact, it might help him politically. There is that possibility in the way that the impeachment trials actually solidified support in the Republican base. I mean, I still think they should have gone ahead with it, but people need to understand that this would be a political bomb. It will take the divisions in the country and it will make them, will pour kerosene on them, to use a rather tired cliche. But you have to do it. Otherwise, you've established the precedent that sitting presidents, former presidents, and presidential candidates are all above the law, which is incredibly dangerous. The more I think about it, the more I think that, given the fact that whatever charges they bring will be like this neutron bomb, they ought to go big. That if you're Merrick Garland, you go, okay, we could charge him with, some small little misdemeanor type things are here. Let's go for it. I mean, let's lay out the whole thing. Let's do what Andrew Weissman is describing, the whole hub and spoke conspiracy. Go for the maximum charge, because actually the controversy created by the maximum charge will not be appreciably bigger or worse than the controversy and the firestorm created by the minimal, weenie charges. Do you follow me here? That if you're going to do it, you might as well just fucking do it.
Concur.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about reconciliation. Are you getting a lot of blowback for you're like tweeting out, you're doubling down on the St. Joe Manchin thing. I mean, among some of your new friends from whom you are getting that strange new respect, saying St. Joe Manchin has got to be as close to heresy as you
If somebody wants to send me a Joe Manchin T-shirt, I will wear it on MSNBC. Okay, I am maybe a medium or a small, depending on whether it's a hipster shirt or not. I will wear it. I'm like the number one Joe Manchin supporter on the entire network. I'm happy to play that role. And only one? It's certainly the number one. I don't know about the only one, but he is. He's the most important politician in America, and for some reason the Democrats don't give him enough credit for that. And we're on the cusp of having like some very real substantive victories, in addition to political victories, that only would have happened if it wasn't for Joe Manchin. And the infrastructure bill probably would have happened without him. But besides that, basically everything the Democrats have done, which has mostly been good. I think, obviously, in retrospect, the COVID bill was overheated. But besides that, like the other legislative accomplishments, CHIPS, and in my opinion, which I want to get to, this reconciliation bill, are all good policy and good politics. And Joe Manchin, one other thing, Joe Manchin was right about BBB. Was right on the policy, was right on the politics. BBB was too big, too much spending. It was inflationary. I know the Democrats wanted to pretend like it wasn't inflationary. It would have been inflationary right now at this time. Joe Manchin was worried about that, maybe because he's dumb, maybe because he's had smart economic advisors. I don't know. It could have been accidental, but he was right about that. He was right about the politics. Nobody knew what was in it. We talked about this ad nauseum. This new bill is very simple. It's an Inflation Reduction Act. You can talk about that. You're cutting spending. Maybe people don't care about that, but it's something you can hold over Republicans' heads. You're dealing with climate, which is the one thing that your base was really super jazzed about. You're dealing with some Obamacare extensions, which is just important practical politics, and to pay for it, you're jamming it to the bankers. I mean, this is good politics, good policy. And by the way, it seems to me, I don't want to speak for the dead, but it's the exact kind of thing that John McCain would have been for, which is the point I wanted to get at. I mean, when John McCain was running in 2008, this was literally his agenda: deficit reduction, dealing with climate change. I know it's so weird for people to remember that, but in 2008, John McCain wanted to do a deficit reduction deal, wanted to do a climate deal with the Democrats. Those were both his explicit campaign promises. That's what Joe Manchin just cut with Chuck Schumer. It should be something that is friendly to, the RVAT type voters that they like, and that something that the base can get excited about. Some of my lib friends already posted on Instagram about how happy they are. That's a good sign, that you're giving the base something. So I just am effusive in my praise of this on both the politics and the policy. And Joe Manchin is literally the only one, it seems like, in the party who got it. So clap.
Well, here's some radical agreement here.
Okay, great.
I think the Manchin actually rescued the Democrats from what would have been a disastrous political mistake. First of all, he got the inflation danger way earlier than anybody else. When the Democratic talking point was to poo-poo it, he was saying, if we pump all of this money in this particular way into the economy right now, it will boost inflation. And so you can imagine what the politics would be. And I think Republicans agree on this, that had you gone for the whole hog, the trillions of dollars, it would be an albatross around the Democrats' neck right now. But also, think where we are right now. And I'm just going to make this very, very brief. I always thought Build Back Better was just a terrible title. It was, I don't know how they focus grouped that one. But the new bill, the new title that apparently is the Joe Manchin bill, the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. I mean, that is not awful, Tim.
Not awful.
That is a better approach than this one. And so between this and the CHIPS bill, if Democrats can go to the country and say, this creates, number one, this creates and will bring back manufacturing jobs in the industrial Midwest. These are bills that will push back against competition from China. These are all things that I think, flip the script on the Republicans in ways that earlier in the show we were talking about, on veterans and on cops. But if they find a way to, make it very clear that this is about jobs, blue-collar jobs in the industrial Midwest, putting Americans back to work, good-paying jobs, competitive jobs, and that we just stuck it to the Chinese, not a bad talking point.
And okay. Tim Ryan nailed that, just really quick. I don't know, again, this is my Tim Ryan fangirl, but he nailed that on the floor yesterday.
No, he actually has figured out a way to sort of counter, he's figured out a way to counter the fake populism of the J.D. Vances. Okay, we don't really have time to get into Ron DeSantis, except I would urge people to read this Vanity Fair story. You and I are both quoted in there. There are...
You had a better quote.
Well, no, I mean, it's,
the fanzine was good.
Well, I was pleased with that. I was pleased that they made my quote, National Review is basically a fanzine for Ron DeSantis right now. They made that the headline. So I was deeply gratified by that. But it is interesting that there are never Trumpers who are going, all right, so Trump is really, really terrible. I mean, DeSantis may be terrible, but he's not as bad as Trump. So they've just moved the bar down. Although I think that, again, is this now the new standard, that if you're not absolutely thoroughly ghastly, we're going to embrace you? And you're quoted, your piece in the Bulwark is quoted about, okay, if DeSantis is less dangerous, maybe he should say so. Maybe he shouldn't be embracing the Stop the Steal or, fooling around with the suggestion the FBI might be behind the Capitol riot. I mean, really, if you want to show that you're not as crazy and anti-democratic as Donald Trump, maybe say that sometime. But
yeah, just an idea. I don't know. I've been told that's a trap by the anti-antis. So I don't know. I guess it's just a liberal trap I'm setting for him, just to say I'm anti-coup.
Okay, so third party, and I'm going to admit a couple of things here that I am agnostic, skeptical, and conflicted, literally conflicted, because this new party that was formed, there was a group of other groups that merged into it, and I was a very inactive member of the board of one of those groups and did sign off on the paper for the merger. So I have fingerprints on all of this, which I told you the other day, and said, but have at it. I mean, if you want to piss from a great height on third party ideas, you have at it. So,
well, I changed because I took your feedback. I decided to be constructive in the Bulwark today, and so instead of
the picture of the unicorn,
that's Hannah that did the unicorn. Okay, I didn't request the unicorn. So we're gonna blame Hannah for that. I will. Brilliant, by the way. Hannah's art is. There's a great Reddit thread on the Bulwark Reddit if people want to get bonus Bulwark content where everybody talks about their favorite Hannah art. It's worth
it is amazing.
Okay. So rather than only piss from a great height, the conceit of the article was that it would also include some constructive, maybe slightly tongue-in-cheek, thoughts about what a third party that could work would look like. And this is the thing, and that frustrates me about the third party efforts is that, any third party effort, we don't need to name names. I don't want to pick on people because almost all these people I greatly admire and all of their courage. And
we always pick on people. This is what we do here.
Yeah, we do pick on people, but I'm just saying, I'm not trying to pick on anyone in particular. Okay, sure. So we can say Andrew Yang. Let's use Andrew Yang. Let's say you have Andrew Yang here, and he's teaming up with a coterie of never Trump Republicans who all voted for Joe Biden in 2020. Okay. And they want to start a third party, whatever. It's a free country, but let's just think about this for a second. Everyone in that group, they might say that they're bipartisan because the people used to be Republicans on the one side that voted for Joe Biden, but Andrew Yang might not feel like a Democrat, but he ran for president as a Democrat. Everybody in that group voted for Joe Biden. Okay. So what is that group offering? You can't see my hands flailing right now. What is that group offering to the Donald Trump voters, to the people that voted for Donald Trump? And what I'm positing is I think nothing. Okay. And so if your third party is only attracting people who are reluctant members of the Biden coalition, plus a handful of people who did write-ins, like wrote in Edmund Burke or whatever, then you're not creating a third party. You're just creating an organized faction within the Biden coalition, which maybe there's some value in doing that actually to try to create some political power, but that's not what they're arguing for. They're arguing that this is a third party. And so what my article says is if you're serious about a third party and you want to do a third party, then you've got to figure out how you can take people from the Trump coalition. And now here's where things get a little dicey. Taking people from the Trump coalition means you got to appeal to voters who like Donald Trump, because there's this myth out there that there are all these Donald Trump voters who don't really like him, but just voted for him anyway. That's not really true. That's at most 10% of his voters. I think it's really more like 5, but at most 10%. And taking 10% of Donald Trump's voters gets you nothing, nada. So how do you get into the people that like Donald Trump? And the only way to do that is by partnering with people that you probably find problematic, and hence the paradox of creating a third party.
Except that they've made it clear that this is not about Trump or Biden or about 2024. In fact, it is, they are they're very explicit. So here's David Jolly yesterday on MSNBC answering this, pointing out that this whole Trump voter, Trump thing, it completely misses the point about what this group is actually trying to do. So this is David Jolly, number one.
So what exactly does this mean? Are we going to see a presidential candidate in 2024 from this third party?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And let me answer that question head on. This is not an effort to run a presidential candidate in 2024 or chase a shiny object. This is an effort to build a viable, credible, durable, sustainable national political party. What that means is setting up essentially 50 state parties and aggregating them under the national coalition that will be forward. What we hope to do is what we've recently been able to do, which is elect a mayor of Newtown, Connecticut, or run candidates for township supervisor, or yes, Congress or Senate. Look, who knows what 2024 presents? And if that moment meets the Forward Party halfway, I'm sure they will reach out and grab it. But that is not the intent of the Forward Party today, to play in the 24 presidential race.
Okay, so let's just leave all that Trump stuff aside for the moment. I mean, the reality is that you have a huge number of Americans that are looking at the system and thinking this system is corrupt, it's dysfunctional, I don't really have a choice. You know, in their op-ed piece yesterday, I think it was Christy Todd, Whitman, David Jolly, and Andrew Yang wrote, you know, some call third parties spoilers, but the system is already spoiled. There are more than 500,000 elected positions in the United States, but a recent study found that more than 70% of races on the ballot in 2020 were unopposed or uncontested. A tiny, tiny sliver of U.S. congressional seats will have close races this November. The two major parties have shut out competition, and America is suffering as a result. So, again, leaving aside the presidential race, because no one wants to split a coalition that might make Donald Trump more palatable, but you look at the possibility, can we create an organization or a movement that focuses on democratic values, ranked choice voting, gerrymandering, other things that have made this system so sclerotic?
Sure, but I don't know what the point, why that's a third party, and like what the mayor of Newtown is going to do. That's fine. I think that there's some good ideas out there, and maybe this can sort of evolve into some of that. I love what was it Malinowski that was pushing in New Jersey,
Sure.
for example, right? Like this
Democrat.
notion that like it's a party, but like not really, because we're like not so much trying to elect our own people as we are trying to like create a block that can punish a party that pushes two extreme candidates within a state. I think that makes sense. I've long thought and have expressed this idea to the third party crowds that doing what Evan is doing in Utah, I think
Evan
makes
McMullen.
sense. McMullen, yeah. I think particularly, I think that he's gonna have a tough race for some particular reasons, but I think that like the notion that maybe there should be some kind of group that works with the Democrats in red states that like tries to rebrand as something, because the Democrat brand is so toxic. Like, how is a Democrat going to win in Kentucky? Maybe it would be better to have a differentiated brand there that has some different types of candidates. So sure. I think that the inverse of that, maybe in blue states for Republicans, especially after what we just saw in Maryland, where like a normal Republican loses a primary to a QAnon lunatic. Maybe it makes sense for the Republicans to create some. So yeah, I think that those are all like strategic things that make sense. The problem, though, again, once you get to a national level, is, and I understand why they don't want to get into that, but like you can't just pretend like Donald Trump doesn't exist. Like once you get to a national level, if you want to attract to a third middle way party, like you have to somehow attract people to vote for Donald Trump. And I think this is the frustrating part about all of this for me, is that like all this conversation is all happening within people that did vote for Biden. Right. So again, you can take Trump and Biden out of it, but still those voters remain the same. And so what are you offering that appeals to them? And it seems to me that a lot of times what we're talking is things that appeal to the sensibilities of folks that are already kind of on the same side.
Fair enough. But I don't think anyone's ever going to accuse the Bulwark or this podcast of pretending that Donald Trump doesn't exist. That's just
that's true.
That's not really our.
No. I know. I was responding to what John. I'm not trying to pick on Jolly in particular. He's not here to defend himself. I like David Jolly. So I'm just at that point that he was making MSNBC is like put Trump aside. It's like, okay, that's fine. But Trump's voters, though,
I understand.
What are we doing about them?
Yeah, we are not going to pretend that Donald Trump does not exist. On the other hand, there is a moment where you go, if you're thinking about, the next century of American politics or the next several decades, where it's not all about Donald Trump. There are other issues. And this is something that I've toyed with in the past, which is that at some point you have to, change the this locked in paradigm of American politics where we think of everything on a continuum of right versus left, that horizontal axis versus the vertical axis of liberalism, illiberalism, pro-democracy, making the country actually function again. And I think that on the margins, you can do something about that. And so this is one of the things that they're doing. And again, I'm saying I'm skeptical, I'm conflicted about all of this, but um, Jolly makes an interesting point about the fact that this is not an ideological party. This is not a center right party. This is something that is different. Now, how that actually plays out, I will admit I don't fully understand. Simply saying that we're independent thinkers, we're open minded. I'm not sure how that works, whether that's a void or not. But again, this is because I wanted to get David into this. This is what David had to say about the question, because at one point, like not that long ago, he wrote an op-ed piece, and he's asked about this. I'll play this in a minute. He's asked about this, where he said this, third parties are doomed for many of the reasons that you just said, and he's trying to explain why this is different than the critique that you just offered and that he offered a year ago. This is David Jolly too.
You yourself have said in the past an effort like this would be electorally doomed. But at the time, you were talking about something that was more center-right. You're talking about something that spans the whole ideological spectrum. Yeah. So how can this work? I mean, and do you see a party that appeals to moderates actually getting more done in Congress?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I wrote a column about a year ago when an effort was launched to build a center-right party, and I said, the lessons of history teach us that to demand Americans coalesce around a specific ideology will fail. And so what has been engineered at the Forward Party is something that's big enough to bring progressives, moderates, and conservatives together. And the basic premise is, look, if we fundamentally agree as Americans, which I believe we do, in economic opportunity, personal liberty, defense of democracy, then let's exercise innovative, optimistic, independent thought and realize that the major parties and the minor parties, all of them, are starting at a point of saying we must subscribe to a specific ideology. I think that's looking backwards, not forward. It's why I was happy to move our organization into this new effort. It is a game changer in modern political thought. 40% of Americans today reject any party, major or minor. But it is wrong to assume they're all moderate. They're not. It's a beautifully diverse coalition. Forward has tried to build a platform to accommodate all of those Americans.
So again, sounds good. How it actually plays in reality, I don't know. It sounds to me as if they are going to start a small ground up building, state organizations, getting into some of these races that are perhaps not competitive in the traditional way. And I guess I'm willing to listen. And by the way, look, we used to be never Trump Republicans. So obviously we like the idea of unicorns. Right?
Yeah, sure.
Sam?
And I again, and that all sounded great that David Jolly it was saying, and I don't get to decide how David Jolly lives his life. I think that I hope that that's intentional. I guess my point is I wish people like David were, and I have a number of conversations on this, and this is an ongoing frustration of mine. I know everyone has their own little picadillos, is that I hear from people like him and they say, well, I'm Tim, I'm thinking about running third party, or I'm thinking about running in a primary against the QAnon Republican in my party. And what I always say is, boy, I wish that more Republicans, former Republicans, people who are still conservative in particular. I don't know that I'm a great fit for this as like a moderate gay, but people who have like conservative social cultural values, but are against Trump on this up-down scale that you're talking about. I wish they would run as Democrats, and I think that would be a more productive use to have more Joe Manchin types, and that goes all the way down in Florida. I don't have the Florida map in front of me, but I'd love to have David Jolly types or other more culturally conservative but pro-democracy people running for House. Sure, even state house, but how about Congress? And see whether that works. Essentially, how about, I'm obsessed with Tim Ryan right now, but how about someone run the Tim Ryan campaign who can do it with maybe a little more credibility because they hadn't, been in Congress, voting with the Democrats, right? I think that's an interesting idea, and in my opinion, a more practical idea that's likely to be successful than than what these guys are talking about.
Well, bring that
One
up
man's
with
opinion.
bring that up with Connor Lamb in Pennsylvania or Sarah Godlewski in Wisconsin. Look,
But
I
they're
think the
jumping into
model.
Senate seats. That's what I'm saying. I
Okay,
think it's different
I
in red state.
I
Like,
see. I think the model here is go back to what's happening in Utah for people who have not been paying attention. So, no Democrat is ever going to get elected in Utah. It's not going to happen, right? So, Mike Lee, who has made himself uber Trumpy, is running for re-election. If it was Mike Lee versus any Democrat, whoever you could come up with, Mike Lee is going to crush that person. Agree? Okay.
concur.
Yeah. Okay. So what Evan McMullin did was he launched a third-party movement, sort of based on he's a conservative, but he's very clearly anti-Trump, against the authoritarian, anti-democratic, racist, radicalist, extremist vibe of the party. He gets into the race, as a third-party candidate. Democrats very prudently, very intelligently decide, okay, we're not going to win this race, so let's stand down. And so the race for Senate in Utah is between this Trumpy Mike Lee and an anti-Trump, never Trump, conservative. And okay, as you point out, it's an uphill fight, but it's a real race. And last
I
time
just-
I looked,
can I-
Evan McMullin's within 5 points of Mike Lee. So that's the kind of perhaps, let's mix up this binary choice that we have been locked into.
Sure. Can I add one thing that's going to make everybody uncomfortable about this, including myself, is that, okay, but we still have to remember the Trump voter. So I agree. I think what's going on in Utah is great, worth a try. For me, it almost doesn't go far enough because, frankly, I think that Evan, despite the fact that he's conservative, agrees with Democrats on a lot of the key issues that are being discussed right now. And so for this to work, why does Joe Manchin work in West Virginia? Let's just keep St. Joe as our North Star. Why does he work? Because he makes libs mad sometimes, because he really makes them mad. And that is appealing to voters that voted for Donald Trump, who also like to make libs mad. Okay? And so in order for these gambits to work, you have to kind of make people in your own coalition uncomfortable because you have to attract people that vote. You can put Donald Trump aside, but I'm talking about the people. You got to attract the people that voted for Donald Trump. How are you going to do that? I would love to have seen like a really hardline anti-abortion candidate run. Or somebody, right? Like, I'm just throwing issues out there. It could be anything. Anti-immigrant. Build the wall, independent or Democrat. Again, I don't want this. All right, I'm not for this, but I'm just trying to think like, how do you actually do it? Like, how do you actually knock off some of these anti-democratic folks in red states? And that's the way. And what I see is a lot of people who are like staying within the comfort bubble of sort of culturally liberal, never Trump world. And like, I'm a culturally liberal, never Trumper. So great. But I think that like that is putting them more in line with Democrats and not actually a strategic thing that is dividing the Republicans, which is the whole point of politics.
See,
one
Tim,
man's opinion.
Here's the deal. I occasionally ride a unicorn.
Okay.
You are a unicorn. So, can we just acknowledge this? The gay conservative, never Trumper.
I'm living in Oakland. I literally had an
But
NPR stringer that came to my house one time and treated me like I was an albino. So I get it. I get it. But I'm not trying to appeal to me. That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to suggest how do we appeal to the dude living in Ogden, Utah, who voted for Donald Trump, but like doesn't like Mike Lee about certain things. How do you get to that guy? It's not going to be with people who are just only going to talk within never Trump culturally elite piety.
No. I certainly agree with this. And again, just to remind people that on this podcast, we will never pretend Donald Trump does not exist. But at some point, we have to think about a completely dysfunctional political system in which the vast majority of voters in this country really aren't going to influence who their congressman is, who their senator is, who their governor is. I mean, there's just a lot of people out there who are disenfranchised because of the way the system works. And it's not a surprise to see the number of people in the polls who just think, American democracy doesn't work. So at some point, we need to do something about that. And again, third party and look, most third parties have failed. There have been some successes, and this is very much, to be determined here. So thank you for the radical agreement today, Tim, and thank you for the radical disagreement, which was not that radical a disagreement here.
Anytime.
Because we're looking this, we're trying to do this. So again, I know you are a busy man being a New York Times best-selling author. So thank you for coming back on the podcast, Tim.
Charlie, I love it. Thanks to everybody for listening.
And the book is
Why We Did It, on shelves now. On shelves now. And I made it 3 weeks. I'm not upset. I made it 3 weeks. It was fantastic. I'm over the moon. I'm so grateful. I was playing Gloria, doing the whole thing. I see the numbers though. There are some listeners out there that haven't bought it yet. I know for sure. And so I'm not mad at you. I'm just grateful for everybody to listen. I'm just grateful for everybody's support. I'm just throwing rose petals at all y'all's feet. But if you haven't bought it yet, go ahead.
We have the names. We have the list.
We do have the list. We have your names. We're checking it twice.
We see you. We know who you are. All right. Thanks for listening to today's podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes. I will be back on Tuesday. And of course, on Monday, Amanda Carpenter and Will Salatan. Have a great weekend.
You loved Lala Kent on Vanderpump Rules. Now get to know her on Give Them Lala.
With her assistant, Jess.
Last night, Lisa wanted to clean out the fridge. And I was like, I can't lift anything. I'm not helping.
Number one, Lala was told she can't lift anything, you guys. So it's not like she's just like, I'm not lifting anything.
No, but I'm not helping. But even my friends know. I'll write you a check. I'll do some Venmo. I'll have something wired. I am not helping. I don't like it.
Give Them Lala. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.